Hi everybody, welcome to another video. So today we're doing something a little bit different. Occasionally I do fairing screens, so the windshield as some people would call it, on a bike fairing. Now if you're not set up to do this, it's probably not worth doing it, certainly if you can buy sort of like a pattern fairing. But for some of the older bikes where you can't get the original spare parts and you can't get a good quality screen, you know, if you get one from a breakers or whatever, it's really scratched, etc. This is actually a good idea to do. Now I've left quite a bit of the prep work in, or a reasonable amount of the prep work in, because the prep work is quite important. If you look at the sanding, while I'm doing the sanding here, you'll see that the various lines appear, and they start to appear as you sand, and that's various coatings that's been put over the plastic of the screen. Now, to do this properly, you need to remove all of that. What I do is normally I'll start with something like a 320 grit on a DA sander that you can see here. And I'll normally just do it until I can start to see some lines, and then switch to something like a 600 grit. However you do it, it doesn't really matter. What you need to end up doing is finishing with 1000 grit. Don't be tempted to go with a finer grit, because if you go with a finer grit, you'll find that the clear doesn't adhere properly. 1000 grit I've found to be absolutely fine. You can try 800. 800 actually works okay, but I stick with 1000 because it's what I do. It's exactly the same technique I use for headlights. Exactly the same thing. You just do exactly the same with a headlight. So you just sand the headlight so that any lines of any previous coatings that's on the in the case of a headlight, obviously the headlight plastic, it has gone, so you're left with just the bare plastic. Now if you want to, you can use a plastic adhesive promoter with this, but I don't. I normally just put the clear straight on, and I haven't had any problems with it. I've been doing it this way for quite a few years, and I haven't had any problems with it, and people I've done it for have never had any problems with it. So it does work. Use a good quality clear coat. This is actually, you may think this looks quite simple. This is actually quite a hard thing to do, to get right. If you're using a clear coat, now I'll explain what I mean by that in a second, but if you're using a clear coat, it's not so much of a problem, because if you do overdo it, and by overdo it, what I mean will happen is that on the where the holes are that the actual screen attaches to the fairing, you'll find that you will get an overload just where those holes are. So if you put on too much, the first place you'll get runs are where those holes are. So the knack is to try and not get any runs at all. Now, what I was saying about doing it with clear coat, as we are here, because this needed to look exactly as standard, because it's quite an old bike, and the chap I was doing it for wanted to, you know, as it was out the factory. So it's just a normal clear coat. So what I was saying about it matters more if you're using not just clear coat. If you add a bit of black to it, and I mean just literally a few spots of black, you'll get a tinted screen. And obviously the more black you add, the more tint you're going to get. But if you are looking to get a tinted screen, don't add much at all, because you'll find literally a couple of drops of, and I mean little drops of black, will really change the tint of the clear coat to make it darker and darker. You can do the same for headlights as well. Obviously you need to be careful of restrictions wherever you live, because making it too dark is well, for headlights is no good, and for a screen is also no good, because you're actually supposed to be able to see through it, although most screens, certainly on sports bikes, actually lay beneath the rider's face anyway. But I'm just going through the various ways of preparing it, which you'll see. So it's the sanding that I mentioned. Then obviously you need to completely clean it. Same as normal paintwork. So it's just I use an alcohol spray to get rid of any of the debris from the sanding, or I use normally a normal degreaser so that you don't have to, you know, worry about any reaction with the clear coat going on the surface. Now, another thing I was going to do is originally I was going to use, and what I normally use for this is either an LPH 50 or an LPH 80, but I've done quite a few videos with the LPH 80 and LPH 50. Not all of them have been uploaded, but I've done quite a few videos with them. So I thought, well, I won't use that, although that is ideal, because what you'll notice is when you come to spray this, to be able to spray it all at once, which you really need to do, you need to hang it by one of the holes. And the side that's curved towards the gun acts like a bit of a sail. So it starts to try and float around. So something like the LPH 50, which runs at 0.9 of a bar, which is what's that, about 11 psi, or the LPH 80, which runs at 13 psi, 1 bar, is absolutely ideal. Or the AZ4, little AZ4 in a 1.0, that runs at 1 bar as well. They don't create as much wind within the fairing screen, so you don't need to hold it so much. But I'd been using those guns. I'd just released a video, or just put a video out with the AZ4, and I've got another video in the pipeline with the AZ4. So I thought I would use something I haven't used for a while. In the videos anyway, the W300. So I used the W300. It runs at 1.5 bar. I wouldn't try and use it with like a full-size gun at 2 bar, because the screen would be all over the place. So anyway, we ended up with a 1.5 bar W300, which is a bit of a compromise, really. Another thing I must mention while I mention it, you'll notice sometimes the actual picture looks a bit, or the video looks a bit light sometimes, and the colour's off a bit. And that's only because I'm experimenting with a new camera. The idea is to give you a bit more detail. And I was using different light settings, etc. And there'll be a few videos that are a bit like this, where it seems a bit overexposed, underexposed. I have actually set it now to fully auto, and it seems to do all right, which I should have done in the first place, but I thought I knew better than the camera, but obviously not. So we're coming to the time now where we're going to spray it, and as you'll see, as I said, it moves around a bit, but I'm just giving this one coat of clear coat. Now I'm using a MIPA CX4, which is a good quality clear coat. There's 2 reasons for that. One is it flows out really nice, so you can put a relatively small amount on it and it will flow out nicely. Because if you use something like a U-pole, you tend to overload it, because it needs more on there to flow out, and then you end up getting runs where the holes are. So I was trying to, although it doesn't matter with the clear coat, I was trying to do it without any runs. But if you add some black to give it a bit of a tint, or any colour you want really, but normally black would be, you know, the tint people would go for, to give it a smoke effect, I always used to call it. But if you do add a bit of black to it, and you do start to get runs, you can't do the normal sanding down and polishing, because it just doesn't seem to work. You seem to get where the line sags. You can tell this has happened before. Where the line sags, you tend to get like a build up of black, and it just doesn't sand out properly. So, as I say, this looks quite easy to do, but it is actually really difficult to do it without getting any runs. But often, if the screen is really old and you just can't buy a replacement, it's the only thing to do. But it actually works very, very well, as you'll see. The other reason for using the MIPA clear coat is it dries. Well, I suppose there's 3 reasons altogether. The second reason is it dries really, really hard, so it gives you a really good hard finish to the screen, which is what you're after. If the screen flexes a bit, you can put a bit of plastic additive, plastic flex additive that you normally use on fairings and things, racing fairings, because they're a bit thinner, they flex around a bit. You can put a bit of that to it. If your fairing screen, if you've got like a higher screen than normal or whatever, and it flexes a bit more than standard, you can add a bit of flex additive to the clear coat as well, and that seems to work okay. but you can see it's literally just one coat I'm doing. You can do 2 coats, but I've always found that one good coat of a good quality clear coat actually does the job really, really well. And you can see that the finished result, it actually looks very, very good. Although I say it myself, it looks very, very good. Leave it for a couple of days to nicely harden off, and then you can do what you want with it. You can polish it if you want to, but I've never found the need most of the time, unless you get, you know, a bit of debris in there or something. But most of the time I get away with it without having to do anything. A temperature today was about, I think it was about 17 degrees, so it wasn't particularly cold, but you know, if don't try and do this if it is cold, because you will have problems. But I still added a bit of heat to it anyway. And here's the final results. You can see it looks super, super clear, but don't be tempted to go to like 1500 and 2000, because it doesn't adhere. It doesn't adhere properly. I've found 1000 is the best, really, and I use exactly the same technique as this for headlights. I do them exactly the same way. Anyway, guys, hope you enjoyed another video of me rabbiting on about things that don't really matter too much, but to some of us, they do give us a little insight into what I do. Cheers, guys. Thanks for watching. Bye bye.